This is great. Totally awesome. The sun will turn into a giant crystal ball after it dies. This was in January 9th of this year. So what they're saying is the sun's going to go through all these weird processes of evolution, and then it's going to become a white dwarf, which is a giant crystal ball 200,000 times denser than regular rocks. No, it's not. The sun's going to become a red dwarf, and then a brown dwarf, and then a Jupiter-type object, and a Neptune, and a gray dwarf, and all that. And it's going to evolve very slowly on a very long time scale, just like this. It's a weird thing about science. You can be both right and wrong at the same time. They're right, and yes, it's going to become a giant crystal, because that's what rocks and minerals are. They're crystals. And the core of the Earth is a giant iron-nickel crystal ball, if you will. It's giant. And Mars has one, Venus has one, Mercury has one. All the dead stars have them. If they evolve slow enough, some dead stars don't have them because they are ripped apart too quick. They couldn't form a giant iron-nickel crystal ball, but they are composed of crystalline structure, which are rocks and minerals. So I think it's really funny how, they're close. They're like right there. They just need to build white dwarfs at the beginning of stellar evolution, like it is in this graph, right in the very bottom, and they expand, instead of at the end where the actual rocks and minerals and other types of crystalline structure are. Star birth happens inside of an environment that's incredibly compressive. And then the star expands to release its heat, and it starts cooling off. And then it starts contracting again after it's gone through its largest stages of evolution. And it loses mass, and then that material connects together chemically to form rocks and minerals, which are crystals. All stars become giant crystal balls. So yes, they are right, but 200,000 times denser than rocks and minerals, not at the end. There's not enough energy for a star to keep all that material together. Think about it. If a star is dead, it doesn't have that kind of energy anymore. It's dead. The matter is mostly inert, even inert chemically in some cases, and it's combined into chemicals that are unreactive for the most part. And the only real way to get rid of them and to break them apart is through radiation and impacts and whatnot. So there's that. I'll link that to the bottom. It's really cool how that happens in science. I've seen this a lot now with astronomy, is that they're both right and wrong at the same time. See, the myth of black holes. I wrote this paper. I'm not going to read it out to you guys. I'll summarize it real quick. Basically, I was reading these leadership books, and I've come to the conclusion that there are such things as non-human leaders. In other words, there are ideas out there that people look at and they accept to be true, and they sort of say, well, this is a representative of the perfect math equation, or the perfect idea of how gravity works perfectly, or how nature works perfectly, and it's kind of just sort of becomes like that in a way where it's an idea that nobody is allowed to question. So black holes have become the mythological, if you will, tyrannical leader, where you're not allowed to question it. You're not allowed to say they're nonsense. You're supposed to keep your head down and not question the people who say, oh, the black holes are real. You have to bow down to them. You have to accept them as being factual because they perfectly describe gravitation in these perfect equations and all this stuff. And basically what I'm saying is it's not a good leader. Black holes are like the Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il of North Korea. They're tyrannical. They don't belong at the very top because they're not responsible ideas, and they sort of skew reality to make it seem to where everything's perfect in just this specific light. But when you go down to the people on the bottom who are suffering and starving to death through famines and they can barely, get along because they can't even afford, food and clean water and sanitation and medical services and things like that. And that's what it's become like in astronomy. The black hole is like Kim Jong Il and all the astronomers that are closest to the idea that spread this propaganda are the ones that reap the rewards and the big bucks and the big experiments and all that. But then the scientists in the very bottom who are like, this isn't working out for me. This isn't a good idea. Like, it doesn't actually apply to anything. Nobody's ever used one to explain anything. It's sort of like this quasi-religious, mythological thing that skews people's minds. It prevents people from thinking clearly about the problems that we're trying to solve in the 21st century. And naturally, I think it's going to eventually dissipate over time, but it's going to take quite a few decades because we need more information and more information from the telescopes to fully rid this nonsensical idea from the textbooks and from public thought. Anyways, I'll link this to the bottom, as well as link the giant crystal ball idea. Of course, all right, you guys, today's Halloween. Eat your Milky Way and Snickers bars. Later.